She's sweet, she's salty, she's smart and craves chocolate every day. Here is your host, the Greek goddess of comedy, Ellen Karis.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sweet and Salty with Ellen Karis. I am very excited today. We have a guest. That's right. You know, I say Sweet and Salty with Ellen Karis. If you've been listening to me for the last 8 years, 9 seasons, we changed our name. We got a new intro song. We got a new attitude, which is we don't care what other people think. We're just going to say whatever it is that we think, which is kind of the attitude we had before, but now we're really going full force. So excited. I have to tell you, I don't know my guest. We just had a 5-minute lovely conversation. I am very intrigued about her background, and I love actually interviewing people that I've never met and I don't know, because as you know, on this show we have a lot of our comedian friends, actor friends, writer friends. So and this will be a new friend, but right now it's a friend that I don't know. So let me give you some details here, some product description. She is an author. She has a book coming out, Politics for People Who Hate Politics. You got to listen. This is fantastic. Actually, I wish I had this at Christmas. She also is an attorney. She's a political insider. Well, we're definitely going to find out about that. Very, very smart graduate of Georgetown University Law Center and Bowdoin College. I might not have said that right. She worked at the highest levels of federal government, from the White House to the U.S. Senate, and as well as obviously law firms. She's a regular contributor to Propel Women with published articles pertaining to personal growth, leadership, and relationships. And speaking of relationships, she was on The Bachelor, which we are totally going to find out about. Let's see. She's an Ironman triathlete. Already, I'm exhausted. But here's what is so interesting. You knew she was going to be somebody special because she was born at Travis Air Force Base in Northern California to a Chinese mother and a Canadian father, and is a product of immigrants like a lot of us, and loves this country for what it stands for, freedom and democracy. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Denise Grace Gitsham.
Oh, thank you. So you've nailed it on the last name. Thank you so much, Ellen, for having me on today. I know it's tricky between my last name and the name of my college. I've gotten so many crazy pronunciations, but you nailed it.
Oh, great. All right. So good. We practiced that. So, yes. Denise, you're just incredible. I don't even know where to begin, but let's begin with that your dad was what, in the Air Force, and did you travel around?
Yeah, so my dad's Canadian. He's from what I love jokingly call the armpit of Canada. It's kind of like the Detroit of America. No offense to any of y'all Detroiters, but he's from Hamilton, Ontario. Okay. And super, blue collar family. My grandparents were immigrants from Wales and England. And my dad looks nothing like me. He's blonde hair, blue eyed. And he came down from Canada when he was 13 with his family, and he joined the Air Force so that he could expedite becoming an American citizen because he loved our country so much. So he actually lied and joined the Air Force, enlisted at the age of 17.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was so excited to do it that he was willing to put his life on the line and jump in and protect and serve our country. So my family is full of military on my mother's side. My mother's Chinese. She was born right before the start of the Chinese Civil War. So my grandfather was a 2-star general with Chiang Kai-shek, we just call them the good guys. And they were fighting the communists. He fought them his whole life. Before them, he fought the Japanese in the Sino-Japanese War. And so there's this really strong belief that America is a place you can come to escape the evils of the world. And because we have freedom. And so my parents are the most proud and patriotic Americans that you've ever met. And they're in their 80s now. And every day, no matter how cold it is, and it's California, so take it with a grain of salt. But no matter what the weather's like, they're putting out the American flag in the morning and taking it down at night and storing it properly. So gotta love that. And that just was such a big part of my growing up and why I love America so much and why I chose to get into politics and governance really early in life.
Do you have siblings?
I don't. I am really lucky. My mom used to threaten me when I was a child. If I was naughty, she'd tell me she'd have more kids. I'm very much an only child in so many ways. I try to hide it. It doesn't work. It comes raging out at the worst times.
That's your punishment.
Yeah. She's like, just watch out. I think one time she had my Chinese cousin over and she was super nice to her. And I came up with a brilliant idea at the age of 5 to play Jaws in our pool. And I was going to be Jaws, and I bit her because I was jealous of how nice my mom was to her. So that gives you a little insight into the true underbelly of Denise Gitsham.
Oh, that's so funny. So do you speak any languages?
Yeah, I speak
Other
Mandarin
languages other
Chinese.
than English?
Yeah,
Mandarin?
I do. I'm really bad at French. I took 5 years of French in undergrad and college and high school, and barely remember any of it. I can order. That's about it at a restaurant. And I speak Mandarin, which is surprisingly more useful than I ever thought it would be as a child. I still dream in Chinese, and I do all my math in Chinese. Numbers all comes to me in Chinese. And sometimes I have a hard time, like any kid of an immigrant, I guess, thinking of phrases that I would translate from Chinese to English.
So did you live all over the world on bases, or what was your, or you had a home in Northern California?
Yeah, I was really lucky in that regard. I didn't have to move. My dad finished out his career at Travis Air Force Base, and they were older parents. So my dad was 40 when he had me, which I think has a lot of benefits to that. But one of the greatest ones was that he retired from the Air Force pretty shortly after I was born. So we got to stay in Northern California.
So where exactly? We're
in Fairfield, California, and I recently relocated to there. It's where we live is really out in the valley. It's called Suisun Valley, and it's only notable. It used to all be apples and orchards, and we had this beautiful we still do have a beautiful 5-acre, it used to be an orchard, and now it's all vineyards. And Camus just left Napa because of their very strict sort of guidelines and regulations around how much they can grow and crush. And they just came in and bought a bunch of land right down the street from us. So we're slowly getting on the map, but I'm so proud of where I grew up because it's the most diverse part, I think, of any place in the country. I think Solano County, where I grew up, was technically the second most diverse county in America, second to Alameda County, which is right down the road. And there's something about growing up with a bunch of immigrants and kids of immigrants and people who have different perspectives on life that no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, you can appreciate and connect with people where they are. It was really survival for me as a kid to be able to do that. But as I grew up, all the people I went to college with were really fancy and went to prep schools, and God bless them, they got great educations. I don't know what I learned in high school, but I do know that I learned some really important things about appreciating people and who they are and what their stories are.
Well, especially when you come from a family, like a lot of us, where they left the country that they were from and born, and came here for, they all say, a better life, to make a living, to start a family, to bring their family. Which, and I'm just going to fast forward a little bit because it's been such a hot topic for such a long time. And, and you realize I live in Manhattan. I'm from here. I've grown up here my entire life. And again, we don't know each other, but I'm of Greek descent. So my grandparents came here. I grew up in a Greek neighborhood, all that, talk about ethnically diverse.
Right.
And I am appalled at what is going on immigration wise in this country. I mean, my grandparents and my one great grandmother who came with my grandmother, Ellis Island, process, a job, they checked you for, obviously for medical, any medical issues that you may have, almost to the point where there were things that were not correct, today would not pass.
Civil liberties were violated and probably other things as well.
Right. But, it was different as opposed to, I don't know what's going on now. And it's not, and it's sad because that in that mix, there were some really great people like our families. But the problem is that because they just seem to let everybody in and treat them all the same way, that you can't decipher who are the bad people and here for harm or no good, and who are the good people that are really suffering and need to be here. So
I'm with you.
So, it's mind blowing. And we're talking now because busloads are coming in from, the border to New York City, and the mayor here is trying to set them up in Brooklyn, and they're like, well, we don't want to go. And now I just was at the hair place, and the woman that owns the salon lives on 57th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue, where they were going to put them up in the hotel, and a lot of them are like outside. She's like, in front of my doorway, and she's like, it's horrible. It's just
inhumane.
It's very. I was just
it's inhumane.
Very inhumane.
It's almost as if, so my mother had to get TB tests and like all these things done when she came from Taiwan. And it took her a long time to become a citizen. She had to learn. My grandfather became a citizen at the age of 80 because he wanted so badly to be an American, and he was Chinese. Like the only thing I remember him being able to say in English was very gooda, like he had to learn history and take a test and do all these things. And they were excited to, they thought that being an American was a real privilege. And
Right.
I think that when we change the rules for different people, I think in any other context, we'd call that racist and or just wrong. Like take the racism issue card off the table, but to have different standards for different people based on their race or their country of origin has never been something our country has said should advantage or disadvantage anybody. And so I think that when we're looking at it from a pure, equal rights and sort of holding up the bar and the standard to make it not higher for one and expensive another is really important. It's foundational to who we are as a nation. But aside from that, I was in the White House on 9/11. I worked for President Bush, and I was 23. And, what I saw on that day on the screen, and actually I had to drive home from the White House to my apartment. I guess I had like a little townhouse in Old Town Alexandria, and it went right past the burning Pentagon. I didn't even know that the Pentagon had gotten hit. We were evacuated I think right before it was. And so I got in the car and I was driving there, and I'm watching this building that's so important to our national security and our defense up in flames. And I thought, if I can do anything to help our country protect itself from another attack like this, I will. And I worked a lot. I ran for Congress in 2016 in San Diego, so a border city and a border district. I spent a lot of time with the Border Patrol to understand what their real issues were. I wanted to represent them well. And I learned that there are so many people who come from other countries through our porous southern border. And I think that as many people as are phenomenal people, and I got to say, I did Hispanic outreach for President Bush because obviously I look Hispanic and nobody can figure out what I am. But it was such a joy and a privilege to work with the Hispanic community because they are the hardest working. They love family. They share our immigrant values. They just love America. And I think it's so important that we never allow ourselves to talk about it in a way that's hateful or anything other than what our true heart is, which is, we want to protect the integrity of what America is and protect her physically from any sort of harm. And at the same time, be able to extend the same benefits that our parents had and that we have in this country. And we can't do that if we don't have a border. We just can't.
Right.
It's not possible. So the America they came to be a part of has to be the one that we're able to give to our children.
Well, the main purpose of the government is to protect us. It's not getting rid of plastic straws. That's not what it's about. That's what it's evolved to, but that's not what it's about. So there's a huge disservice that they've given us. And at this point, I am so disgusted with Washington in general, and everybody, this is my feeling. Everybody's got their hand in the till. Everybody's getting paid underneath the table. They're all sleeping together. It's one big freaking orgy. That's it. And we're not invited. Not that I would want to be invited, but
well, have you seen the people that are in Washington? You might want to read.
Washington, politics is Hollywood for ugly people. That's what it is.
Exactly. So, that's what they call it. Hollywood.
They're all on TV. You'll appreciate this, being that someone that is, you do political speaking as well, or political commentating. I had done a lot of work on Fox, And I've said this story before on the podcast, but I'll tell you very quickly. One of the first times I was on Hannity, I remember I was in the green room and Jason Chavitz was there, and I'll say his name, I don't care. And he had just gotten elected as congressperson in Utah. And I just said to myself, what the freak is this guy doing here? He's in politics for 2 seconds. Why is he here? Fast forward, he fills in for Hannity. And Sean Hannity was very nice to me, so this isn't against Sean Hannity. But it was, but I knew, like, my gut, you get that instinct. And I was just like, this guy's in it so he could be on TV. And lo and behold, I was right. I mean, this has been going on for years. I hate to keep slamming the guy, but it's the truth. It's like he got into politics so he can get on TV. When we were growing up, well, of course, there were 3 channels when I was growing up, but the politicians, unless they were somebody big, they never really did TV. They certainly didn't do talk shows and everything else that we have in podcasts. I mean, now they're all over the place. They YouTube channels, and they're talking on their own Instagram page. They're loving it. They are celebrities. It's disgusting.
Well, we've set them up, we've really changed the incentivization for coming to Washington. And I know as many amazing members of Congress personally that I would throw all my money into to get reelected as I do people that I wouldn't grab coffee with, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But I would say that I fully understand this disgust with what Trump turned the swamp. Right? Like, we've known that something's been off, but we really weren't able to put our finger on it for a really long time. And as someone who's seen it from the inside and the outside, it is hard to understand what happens in the Beltway, because democracy is definitionally a compromise, right? You can't, as much as we all like to get our way all the time, I don't think our nation's better off when it's always one party and one rule. That party inevitably is going to fall and splinter and crack and eat itself alive. You're seeing that on the right and the left right now. Right. I think what we want is we want to try to control human nature, which from the beginning of time has been impossible. I mean, like, if you watch nothing new is under the sun, quote King Solomon. I mean, there's just nothing new. Human nature is the same then, today, yesterday, and forever. Right. And I think what we need to do is take out the incentives that have been there, that we've really set people up to profit from doing what they do in Washington. And I think the number one thing we can do to just achieve that is to get rid of all the money that goes into politics. Campaign finance reform is definitely a thing, and it can't be one side or the other that does it. But I've always believed, and this is very unpopular in Washington because there's a whole consultant class that benefits from this, but I've always believed that we should have 60 or 90 or 120-day publicly financed campaign, because I would do anything to support people who are running on a level playing field. But I have a really hard time with, and I had to do this during my campaign, so I can speak from personal experience, to have to go and sit with a bunch of PAC folks that expect you to vote in lockstep with them is really, really a challenge, especially when you're running against somebody who is, I ran against a guy who was the 4th wealthiest member of Congress. So I wasn't able to self-fund my campaign. So I needed PAC money to even have a chance to beat him. And there's this justification thing that happens in your brain. And I wasn't immune from it, saying, if I just do this now, I can get in there and make a change. And the best of intentions just get so twisted because all of a sudden you're just trying to stay in so you can make a change, but you're trying so hard to stay in that you can't ever make the change.
You said so many interesting points. And maybe you can just enlighten our audience, because we've never really had anybody like you that understands campaign financing and where it goes awry. But what you said, and I've said it before during different election cycles, is the fact that the people with the most money win blows my mind. Because why is that? Is it the commercial? It can't be just the commercials. Like, what is it? And I'll give you a great example. We have a district attorney in this city of Manhattan by the name of Alvin Bragg. This man should be in jail. What he has done, and he has destroyed this city. The crime is rampant. And apparently the amount of criminals, let's just say it's like the same 3,000 people, apparently, okay, out of 8.3 million that live here. Okay. It's like the same 3,000 criminals. And what happens is, even when they get arrested, they get released. this man's campaign, he ran against somebody else, a Republican, lost. And I don't understand, because this just happened in November. And every article or anytime you read anything, it's always like they outspent them. How does that make a difference? That's what I don't care if I saw a commercial for Alvin Bragg every second of the day. I would never vote for him. He's awful. He's the enemy. So why? Same thing we had. Although I didn't hate him, but I had my issue with him. But a few mayors ago, we had Michael Bloomberg, who was a billionaire and a multi-billionaire. And he came in, and I will say, compared to what we've had, we would all take Bloomberg back again, because that's how it became. And de Blasio was horrific. But he blew away anybody, because he had no political experience, and not everybody knew him. But he blew everybody away because he had the biggest war chest. And this is what everybody keeps saying: it's the people that have the most money win. Why is that? If when I go in the voting booth, it's about my vote, there's a disconnect, and I don't understand it.
I didn't understand it either. And I worked in campaigns my whole life before I ran myself. And I challenged like the National Republican Congressional Committee and the amounts they asked me to raise. And mostly because I hate raising money. It's horrible having to cold call 125 people in a day and have no one call you back for days on end. It's really brutal.
Welcome to stand-up comedy. Yeah.
No, I know. I'm sure there's plenty of parallels. I wouldn't say it's 100% the case. I think that when there's enough discontent, for example, the San Francisco DA race, we actually are way ahead of y'all in New York for once. We actually kicked out the district attorney because it was so horrific. People were moving out of San Francisco in droves. And so there came this point where they were just like, no more. Of course, they elected somebody else in that place that hasn't done a much better job, from what I understand. I don't go to the city that often, but I would say you really have to be so frustrated with somebody to even get people to think about making a change. I mean, we still have Gavin Newsom, and we even tried to recall him. The difference is there's two things that need to happen. One, you have to give people a viable alternative that they believe that even if I don't agree with you, I think you respect what I'm saying and you're going to do something better. You're just some order of magnitude better, whether small or large, right? You've got to give them a viable alternative or they have nowhere to go. Just like a vacuum of power in our international sphere always results in, it never stays for long. Something else will fill it. You always have to have a good alternative. And I don't think we've done a great job as Republicans, speaking as a Republican, in offering a really viable alternative to the people that are already in. So where are people going to go? The second thing is name ID is so essential. In my head, ridiculous, because I never did fundraising on the campaign side before until I was a candidate myself. I had this notion of like kissing babies and shaking hands and doing all the things that come naturally to me, like the fun part of campaigning. I didn't have the image of the old lady that actually spit on me and, those kinds of things that actually did happen. It was much more glamorous in my brain. But what I realized is when you come from 0% name ID, which is where I was when I ran, against somebody who's been in politics for 20 years and has 100%, or like he had like 97% name ID. He was city council president and city council and the coastal commission, and then a congressman. You had a lot to overcome. And people will only put their money behind a winner. So you have to prove that you have traction or some hope of winning. Otherwise, it's like, I think you're really great, but I'm not going to put my money behind you. I'm going to wait to see if you're tested. And the reason it costs so much in my district is we were often the test case. And this is true regardless of what district you run from. Media markets are insanely expensive, but mine was the most expensive in the nation. And so we had 3 different media markets in the most expensive areas, Orange County, and then 2 parts of San Diego County. And so in order to get one TV ad across your whole district, you needed to buy in 3 media markets that were among the most expensive in the nation. That just costs a lot of money. I ended up raising $1.6 million. It was enough to get me the accolades that I needed in Washington for people to take me seriously, but it wasn't enough to keep me on TV for 2 weeks of the last 4 of the campaign. And so you get to this point as a candidate where you think, can I ethically, with fully solid conscience, go back and ask my biggest donors to write another $100,000 check to help keep me on TV when I see where I am in the polls. I'm close, but I'm not close enough to close the gap. And I want these people to be my friends at the end of it because I'm very grateful to them. And you make hard decisions, and most people think, I'm just going to run again next time and build on what I've already got. Unfortunately, they redistricted our district in the last just last year. So it didn't make sense for
me. It doesn't give good people that want to run an opportunity. And obviously everybody starts someplace, right? So Alvin Bragg started someplace.
Yeah.
But once they get in, like you get into the club, that's it. I mean, look at, again, going back to our state too, Chuck Schumer, who's God knows the money that this man has amassed in his backdoor shenanigans, 30, 35 years.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. We live in an incredibly ageist society, especially toward women. I'm in the entertainment business. I don't have to tell you, it's disgusting. In stand-up comedy, it's still 1963. And well, we used to be 1945 when I started, so we're getting there. But for some reason in politics, you know, as is like our president, and again, I don't like Joe Biden, not because he's 80. I don't like Joe Biden because of everything he stands for. And he also seems like he's losing it. And that's just like, you know, it's just disturbing to watch him. The leader of the free world. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, it's one thing if it's like your uncle, your Uncle Bob, like, and he's retired, and your aunt's taking care of him. It's another thing, you leader of the free world, and you're signing bills that are affecting people's lives. Although I don't think I don't think he's as off as people say he is. You know what I mean? I think he has his moments, and I think we see that on TV, but and in interviews. But he knows what he's doing. He's very manipulative. But anyway, very frustrating to hear what you're saying, because and what you said, I believe that's probably what I witnessed when Nicole Malliotakis tried to run as mayor, and de Blasio again, like. But that's what blows my mind. The guy was so bad. You would think, okay, let's try this lady. And she was an assembly person, by the way, for like 10 years. So it's not like she just
came out. Name ID.
Not like she came out of no place. I mean, and Staten Island, which I don't know what you know about New York, but like Staten Island it's its own borough. It's red. We're all the five of us are our own borough, but that one is really like separated and all that other kind of stuff. But even, but still, I just couldn't believe that she lost. But with that said, and I was saying to you before we went on air, the voter turnout here, and I could just speak for here, is very, very low, especially in local elections. And although de Blasio won 80% of the vote, it was 30% of the population that voted. So sad. Do the math. But,
I mean, that speaks volumes right there. But one thing I think it would benefit all of us, and I whether you actually care or you just pretend to care, I think it's actually a smart move whether or not you actually in fact care, is being really curious. I think this is something in our frustration, I feel like, and this is just a human thing, right? It's politics in any sphere of culture that you want to apply this to. When we're frustrated, I do this too. So I'm preaching to myself, but I think that we tend to just point the finger and be like, we double down on, gosh, I told you so, right? Like, I was right. I knew this was going to happen. We told you, don't blame us. But I think another thing that we can do that might help us change the trajectory is slowing down long enough to say, well, tell me why. Help me to understand the mindset of the other side. Help me to understand how you chose. Because a lot of times people don't really have strong opinions one way or the other. Most people are not super political. Most people are trying to think of how to feed their family and how to survive and maybe go on a vacation once a year, right? Most people don't have the luxury to do this. So when people choose to go a certain direction, this happened when I ran, the Hispanic outreach for President Bush. I'd ask all these Democrats that were Latinos, I'd say, hey, why are you voting for him? You're like a really prominent Democratic mayor of El Paso, or, whatever, like you've got some cachet in the Democratic Party. Why are you supporting a Republican? And they said something that was so profound. I think whether you're in politics or not, this can apply to your life and it can make it better in your relationships for sure. They said, we don't really agree with President or Governor Bush on a lot of these issues, but we think that he respects us and we feel like he likes us. And one of the reasons I wrote my book, Politics for People Who Hate Politics, is because I felt like we've kind of lost the art of curiosity, and that comes from a position of self-righteousness and frustration, which is just human nature to be like that, especially when you've tried to change things and you just find yourself, hitting against a wall and getting nowhere, but also like a sincere desire to understand where other people are coming from. And I'm not saying it's going to change things overnight, but recognizing that we can respect people we disagree with, and to really engage with them in a thoughtful conversation that involves not only your logic, but also putting yourself in their shoes, is a really helpful way to recalibrate a conversation that could otherwise go a different direction and just further divide us.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think we're at a point where there is some underground world that is manipulating things because you hear things and it just blows your mind. Again, like being the immigration and, and just the fact that these people are here on our streets and we've got tents and mattress. And I'm not just talking about just one block. I mean, that right then and there, just the fighting, just the whole thing about January 6th, which and I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not saying that was a good thing. I wasn't there. I would never do something like that. But and by the way, I was at 9/11 because I worked on Wall Street and I saw the first plane. So and when people say January 6th is like 9/11, it's like, come here. I'm going to rip your fucking head off. Like, I can't even, I can't, like, that's how crazy. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that. You have no idea what that's like. I get incensed. I just, it makes me nuts.
I understand that.
So all of that manipulation of facts and just, what's going on with Joe Biden, the documents, the Hunter, this is, as we know. And again, I'm not sticking up for Trump because Trump did a lot of things that put himself in the hole that he's in. I've said this on the podcast. I'll say it again. He could have been the next Ronald Reagan because he did come from not a political place. He didn't give a crap. And he really did want to just point at anyone. And he did start calling people out and they were pissed because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe he's telling our secrets, But anyway, his ego got in the way. We know him here because we're New Yorkers.
That's right.
But his policies were great, but it got too much. The name calling, the tweeting, we all know. So, but to get to that, so what they went in, they raided his house, they went through Melania's underwear, whatever those perverts did, all this kind of stuff. And this is like nothing. This is just, there's just a few boxes next to a Corvette. Why does he have a Corvette? I mean, it just goes on and on. So my point is, if all this that happened to Hunter were Donald Trump Jr., it would have been a whole different situation. Again, I'm not saying I love one and the other. It's just there's so much unfairness. Same thing, the criminal justice system. It's about the criminals. It should be the victim justice system, not the criminal justice system. What is going on here, I can't keep up with everything in the country. I can only keep up with what's in my own backyard. Letting criminals out, if you arrest them, it's racist. I mean, it's just freaking ridiculous. They're looting, they're letting them go. What did Gavin give them? You can go in and take $1,000.
Sanctuary state. It's a sanctuary state. We have California. Yeah.
It's beyond. So like, these are things that are just destructive. It's like being an alcoholic or being a drug addict. You're going to wind up dead. That's it. It never ends well.
And those who finance the campaigns are the ones that are least affected by it. As my friend in San Francisco says, all the wealthy people who live at the top at Pack Heights and where Nancy Pelosi lives and all the high parts. She said, Denise, I said, what do these people do? There's so much crime here. And she said, crime don't climb. And I thought that was an interesting statement for so many reasons. I laughed, but I also thought about it a lot because they're not affected by the things that the rest of us have to deal with. And so they can buy themselves out of it while pointing a finger at the people who have to deal with the real ramifications of bad policy decisions.
Oh, yeah, it's the same thing here.
Bad.
They take Ubers, right? They don't take the subway. They live in doorman buildings. They take private jets. I mean, if you have money, you could do a lot of things with your life. You can put a security gate around you for the most part. Although, speaking of Nancy Pelosi, I think it's very bizarre what happened, and I don't even have like a conspiracy theory about it. I mean, it sounds like it was like this nut that was looking for Nancy, but the fact that he was able to go to the house that seemed like right off the street, which was a little weird. I mean, they have tons of money, speaking of, of being on the take, and the fact that he was able to smash the door and come in with no security alarm and anything going off. I just thought that part was like very weird. And he got and then made his way up to the bedroom and all. But anyway, I want to get to, I could talk to you forever. I want to get to you though. I mean, we're getting your perspective and everything, but I just want to kind of get to your career and then the book, and you do public speaking, and I'm not letting you off the hook. You're going to talk about The Bachelor.
I can never escape that one.
So you worked for President Bush, you said?
I did. Yeah, it was my first job when he was governor. I worked for Karl Rove. I don't think, and as much as people may vilify him, I don't think anyone's smarter in the Republican Party than Karl. And we've never won the way we did when he was there running things and strategizing, and really, like, it was a golden era where Carville was with Clinton and, Karl was with President Bush. And that's an era, I guess everyone's nostalgic about what they experienced, but to me, learning at the feet of the master, whatever you think about him, he was indisputably the smartest strategist that ever walked the face of the earth in my mind. And so I got to sit at his feet really from 1999 to 2000. I was an intern for a long time for him. And then I got put in charge of Hispanic outreach, which was hilarious. A half Chinese girl. When he offered it to me, I just said, gracias. And I just moved on because I'd been his intern for so long that I needed a paycheck. And so I took it, and it was an honor. It was an honor and a privilege to do that. And then I got to go to Washington, and it was really fun. I got sick of Washington real fast. It's funny. I remember applying for a job at Fleischman Hiller, the PR firm, I think it was August of 2001. I realized that politics, I was very naive about Washington. I realized that what was happening is it was an internal political campaign, but I didn't have any words for it back then. Like, everyone was just running to stay in office. And I came to Washington thinking we were going to solve problems. And what I saw was just a bunch of people continuing to run for office. And so I got disenchanted, and the weather sucked, and it was Washington, D.C. It was kind of boring. And I thought, I'm going to just go do something else and make a lot more money than working at the White House. But then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I think for at least a year, at least in my experience, people put aside their own selfish ambition and came together because they realized what we have in America is worth fighting for. And you guys saw that in New York better than anything. We would watch you with tears in our eyes as we saw people helping each other and loving each other and being a very uncharacteristically New York, like just going above and beyond to just support each other, even without words. We saw it in your gestures and your facial features and your expressions, and our heart just broke for New York. And that changed my life. I think I would have gotten out of government if it hadn't been for 9/11. I really, you're faced with that question: is your life more important, and just your happiness, or is saving this thing, this? It's really America's an idea. Is saving this idea, this fragile system that only exists because we allow it to, worth fighting for, so that you can have all the things that you think you want. And I chose America.
So what did you do post 9/11? So what was your work?
Yeah, so then I went to work for Attorney General John Ashcroft. And I helped. I wasn't a lawyer at the time. I was just a kid, so I got to learn a lot, but I had a chance to do something very controversial in retrospect. And even at the time it was too. But I traveled around the country and I would take a U.S. attorney along with me, so a federal prosecutor, and we would go and engage at the grassroots level, different groups that were opposed to the Patriot Act, and explain why prosecutors needed the tools that were in the Patriot Act in order to prevent another attack from happening. And, at that time, and still now, the whole responsibility of preventing another 9/11 fell on the shoulders of the executive branch. And so we felt such a responsibility to never let anything slip through the cracks that we probably went way overboard in cracking down on, there was a civil liberties trade-off for sure in return for protection. And so it was a very interesting conversation. I ended up going to law school at night at Georgetown. You were talking about how, politics used to not be it wasn't a thing you profited from. Georgetown Law School was actually set up with an evening program because it was for members of Congress who had a job in the daytime to go to at night so that they could go back to their own, districts and actually be of use in their community. And so I went to Georgetown Law School at night while I worked full-time for the Attorney General. And when I was there, I realized I didn't like school as much as I liked working because more exciting things were happening. I ended up working on the confirmation of Chief Justice John Roberts, who'd been a professor of mine. It was really fascinating to be there. And then Alito came through, and my boss at the White House for a brief period, Harriet Miers, was a nominee. So I really got to see what it was like to be on the Senate Judiciary Committee and work on the Hill on a very controversial nomination on many of them. So that was really interesting. And I came out, I was a lawyer. I tried to be a lawyer for a while. Lawyering, I should have said recovering attorney in my bio. I'm forever in recovery. When you work on things that really are meaningful, and then you go to work at a law firm where they're doing important things, but they weren't big to me after what I had done, it was very hard to get excited about work.
What kind of law were you involved in?
I did regulatory law. I did a little bit of everything. I only stayed at the firm for a year and 3 months. It was a great firm. I loved the people. I just wasn't passionate about the work. So I went in-house for a client that got me home to California. And I ended up going to San Diego, which is not a hardship. And I felt like I deserved it after all that time in Washington. And it was great to get out of the Beltway. And I've never gone back full time. I've stayed, just a citizen that really is very involved in politics, but isn't part of the Beltway culture anymore. And started my own company so I could be a net contributor to society instead of someone who just sucked off the government teat forever and just recycled problems. I wanted to do something to provide for people, to add value.
And what was that? What did you, what kind
So I started a communications firm, a strategic communications firm, and help entrepreneurs get some PR and tech and think about strategically who they wanted to be and wanted to be positioned as. And we learned so much about the private sector, which you don't learn much about when you're in Washington. I understood for the first time.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I just have to interrupt you, which is a problem because that's the problem. Most of them have never worked in the private sector.
They've never worked.
Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Nancy
Never.
Pelosi never had a real job in their life. Okay. That you can't take away from Donald Trump. I don't care what you say. Bankruptcy, blah, 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 blah. That's not none of them, for the most part, most of them have not. So, and I like the business background. So again, we're just getting to know each other, but I was a CPA. I have an MBA in finance. I worked in Wall Street. By the way, I dealt with the Patriot Act as well. And of course,
I bet you did.
And I was in the derivatives world. And of course I dealt with regulatory and the lawyers and the in-house lawyers and all that stuff. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And it was over the top. And even today in our lives, we have to do something, these I-9s and all this kind of stuff. All the ID that we have to show, it's all because of 9/11. So anyway, but
I understand that.
But I'm sorry to get back.
No, your point is so well taken.
No, it's true. It's true. Is that they don't know. So that's good that you were, you went a different direction anyway. So
I wanted to know. I wanted to know what real people were talking about, not just in terms of talking points. I wanted to experience it so I could speak about it myself. And I wanted to help and add value. And sadly, that's not what you see a lot of in Washington. So when it came time to take out that congressman that was in Southern California, in San Diego, where I was living, he'd voted for the Iran Nuclear Act, which I could not, as somebody who worked in 9/11 on the White House, and someone who worked in national security for so long, I couldn't stomach it. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Forget about all the rest of the things he did that I disagreed with. And he was a really nice guy, super likable, but just really made the wrong decision on that issue. And I went all in, and I went in with a vengeance. And for a year, I campaigned almost to the day. I campaigned for a year. I really dragged my feet in jumping in, because as an unmarried woman at 38 at the time, I could not imagine being subjected to the things that people say about you in politics, which is why so many good people stay out. They don't want to put their families or themselves through that.
Right.
You know, I don't blame them. It's brutal. And
What
I
did
suffered.
you
I got
find?
gray hair.
What, give us an example of one of the things that happened to you during the campaign that were awful on a personal level.
Yeah. So my opponent was the fourth wealthiest member of Congress, and he hired this tracker that looked like the Unabomber. So tracker, he was like basically a stalker, paid stalker. And I lived in this really beautiful modern apartment building in downtown San Diego in Little Italy, and had floor to ceiling windows. And I'm 99% sure that they actually rented the apartment across the street, and they were always there with video cameras. It was just so creepy, only while I was running for Congress. And then that whole situation went away. But what I do know for sure is that every time I opened my front door, that guy was in front, following me every step that I went. One time I had a real bad day, as I had many bad days on the campaign trail, let's be honest. And I was sobbing, and I was praying with my best friend. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And he was filming me the whole time. It's just such, I'm not a celebrity. I didn't even, and there's just this sense that people have a right to just say whatever and do whatever, because you're trying to do something to, to better whatever. They disagree with you. I don't even know the rationale. I can't imagine who thought that was a great idea on this campaign, frankly, to have some freaky looking dude following you 24/7, and when you're a single 38-year-old woman with a dog. It didn't make any sense.
First of all, it sounds incredibly sexist, and I wonder if they would have done it.
Right?
Guy.
I pointed that out.
And also, did you ever debate your opponent?
He wouldn't. So that's one of the tactics that people often adopt. I'm sure
that's
you
what
know
they did in Arizona. The woman.
Yeah, they won't dignify. Exactly.
Yeah.
They won't dignify you by debating you. So we were much cleverer than that. So we actually asked like groups that he had to say yes to, constituent groups, to make the requests so he couldn't turn them down. So there's easy workarounds on that. And sometimes we'd go and he wouldn't show up, and we just
I'm sorry, but you didn't debate him, you said, right?
I ended up debating him. I think it was 3 times, which again, he was a lawyer from Duke. I was a lawyer from Georgetown. So it was pretty much a draw. I think I had some good slam dunks, a little jabs here and there. But I started, when I launched my campaign, one thing I realized, and this is what I alluded to, and this is the premise of my book, is I'm a Christian first and foremost. And I think that if I'm going to be someone who claims a faith, then I actually need to be a representative of the faith that I claim. Otherwise, I should just stop saying it. And maybe this is why I don't have a fish on my car, because if I scream at someone and flip them off, I don't want to put that on Jesus, like that's not a thing. And so when you stand for something and you say, look, I actually really in my heart, I have a lot of Democrat friends that I truly respect and admire. I disagree with them completely on policy issues, but I love them as people. And I understand how they got where they got, just like all of us. We have people that we love in our families that we would die for, but we totally think they're idiots because they disagree with us. And I thought, what if we had a conversation about the issues and had a debate on the merits of our policy, our respective policy positions, but kept out all of the personal attacks and all of the things that obfuscate like the real issues. And so I launched my campaign on the premise and the foundational platform, which was I'm going to engage with kindness, civility, and respect. No matter what you do to my opponent, I told them, I'm going to do that. And the primary was brutal. That's actually where that had to come in. And that was hard for me because I wanted to fight back. And I really have some low moments where I didn't uphold my end of the bargain as well as I wanted to. But my guiding premise was, if I'm going to say that I'm a Christian, I need to start acting like it. And so that really made me think about what you're seeing. It doesn't really matter what faith you're in or what you believe in. You're always a representative of something. People are going to see what you stand for and ascribe the qualities that you represent in the world to whatever it is that you say you believe in. And I just thought, I think at the end of the day, I'm more of a Christian than I am anything else. So I'm going to engage the way I think Jesus would. And that really requires a lot of self-control, a lot of miraculous supernatural help from God, and a lot of self-examination about how I'm showing up in the world, whether it's in politics or any other part of my life. I had a higher standard and a higher calling and a higher power to answer to.
So what denomination are you of Christianity?
I'm non-denominational. I always joke that I'm a Baptist Costal with a hard Jesuit bent. I just love the whole body of Christ. I have great Greek Orthodox friends that I've worshiped with and I love so much. There's nobody that I think that's beyond being called a child of God. God loves all of us. And whether you're Muslim or anything else, I love you because you're a reflection of God.
So by the way, there is a big Greek Orthodox church in San Diego. I believe it's called Saint Spiridon. I've spoken to them.
Oh, nice.
Because I have a Greek Greek American act, but I haven't been able to get there. But anyway, and by the way,
it's really good. I saw part of it. It's fabulous.
Yeah, San Diego is just, I don't know, the most perfect place on the planet, right?
It
but
is.
I hear you. I think that's great. I believe in Christ. I wear a cross. I go to church. I teach Sunday school. I've been Greek Orthodox. I came in Greek Orthodox. I'm leaving Greek Orthodox. You know, I had the grandmother, whatever, you know, the whole culture, the whole thing. I hear what you're saying. I was having this conversation and now I can remember who I was having it. I just had this conversation the other day and, it was yesterday at a luncheon. I did it was a luncheon for veterans. And we were talking about how times have changed, things are happening. This guy had two kids, what the kids are learning in school, what's the priority, the whole thing with the gender, because, you know, so apparently every kid now wants to change. This is not to take away from the kids that, you know, like address the ones that do, you know, but it's not everybody, but everybody. Right. And then if you're there, and I can't take the pronouns. The pronouns are that I'm never signing up for the pronouns. I don't care. Don't want to hire me. I don't give a shit. I'm not signing up. I'm a her, I'm a she. Get away from, and I'm not putting it on my signature. I can't. Anyway, I'm going off the rails here, but I was saying how
it's freestyling. Go.
Well, listen, there is no script. I mean, you gave me a bio. Thank God I had that, but there's no script here. Okay. And I've kept it kind of clean except for my one F-bomb, but what I feel, at least what I learned in my faith, and I think as Christians we learn that, and Judaism also. I live in New York, you know, Jewish people.
Most people of faith.
So it teaches, and I don't know much about the Muslim religion, but we'll just throw that in there as well. But it teaches you boundaries. And when you have that faith or something, and again, not everybody believes in God, so that doesn't mean they're a bad person. I just feel like you have to believe in something, just a higher something, whether it's a planet, whether it's the universe. There's definitely more to the story that we don't know. But as a Christian,
maybe it's karma that you believe in, whatever it is.
But as a Christian, and when you read the teachings of Christ and the parables and the stories and some of the Gospels, and I'm not an expert, but just of the things that I know and I read, and we focus a lot on the New Testament as well. You know, none of us can ever be Christ. We're never going to emulate Christ, but we can be as Christ-like as possible. And then we are going to fail. That's a given. And then it's about recognizing that you did fail and what you did and fixing it and changing it and asking for forgiveness. And you might do it a second time and you got to go whatever. So it's that, but it teaches you there's just a line. There's just a, you know, sort of like a circle around you that you know that you can't cross over, like, you know, stabbing somebody for no good reason, you know, different than self-defense, by the way. So, so I hear you.
Thanks for clarifying.
So I hear you, and that's noble. But I have to say though, there are people who don't believe in organized religion that would hear you and I and then be like, oh my, and hear you more, you know, be like, oh, she's a Jesus lover. Oh, what would Jesus do? Oh, you know, and then they put you in this category of a Jim Baker and you're, you know, and you're bilking people. That's where it goes, right? It just goes.
I've never been called. That's a first.
But that's where it goes. It goes to this.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay.
But you know,
that's okay.
Nobody wants to hear that this country was built on Judeo-Christian values. You can't erase that.
Undeniable.
I know, but anyway, it's so crazy. But with all that said, if you don't believe, that's cool. Just be a good person. Just be a good
just try.
being. That's all.
What I found though is that the definition of good is even subjective to many.
Yes,
so they think they're doing good. I mean, if whether on either side of the abortion issue, if you're bombing an abortion clinic to save babies' lives but killing people, you're wrong.
Right.
And if you're screwing people over because they are pro-life and you're destroying their careers, that's also wrong, right? There's people that are wrong on both sides of the aisle, but that's not the majority of us. So I kind of leave those people out. One thing you learn when you run for Congress is I don't really care at all what people think of me, because if I did, I'd never get out of bed. And I used to joke that people would say, you're fearless. I'm like, no, I'm not fearless. I cry a lot. And you get to the point where you just can't care. And I joked that by the end of the campaign, I was like Teflon, like there's nothing that could stick to me. I wish that I hadn't stayed in that mode, because I'd be way more effective in life if I was, but I have emotions and I care about people, and it hurts me when I'm human. You
grow a thick skin. I've been in comedy for 20 years. I understand it.
Yeah.
You grow a thick skin, but there is, like, to me, like AOC, nothing. Nancy Pelosi, nothing. Like there's some of the Chuck Schumer, nothing. Some of them, there are, and you don't have to be in politics, obviously. There are people like that. It's like nothing.
Right.
I'm not wired that way. You're not wired that way. I get it. Tell us about your book a little bit more and why people should buy it. Yeah. I'm going to order. Yeah. I'm assuming it's on Amazon. Is it on pre-order yet? Or
it'll because it's coming out in February. Or sorry, February. It's coming out in September of this year.
Okay.
It is being published by Baker Books.
Nice.
And it is so it really is, the premise of it all is what role do we play in helping to shape the America that we want to see? Right? Like, I really, as a conservative, I think this is a fundamental conservative value, is to take like radical self-responsibility for your life and how you show up in the world. And I think that is core to my faith, that is my conservatism. And I believe that most people feel that way, even people who aren't conservative and people who don't have a faith. I think that, at least when you turn it around on them and you start acting out however you want, they're going to say, hey, that's not fair, because they fundamentally believe that you should be responsible for your life, whether they articulate that or live by it or not. And so the premise of the book is really, how do we as Americans show up in a way that actually helps bridge the divide in America? Because whether you believe it's possible or not, one thing is absolutely certain. You just look at the history of civilizations. It's the same arc in every civilization. And that is that you get democracies that can hang out for a little while and be okay, and there's a tension, and then all of a sudden they become what we're starting to see our political parties become now, and they crash. And having parents come from countries where, say what you will about Canada, it's essentially a socialist nation. You have socialist nation. My mom escaped from communist China. I have seen the alternatives, and I've traveled all over the world, and I've seen what other people come. There's a reason people come over our borders with a gallon of water and are willing to pay people to put them in trucks and like containers, shipping containers, and crawl over broken glass to come to this country. And it's because we have something worth coming for. And so I'm going to do whatever I can to take radical self-responsibility to understand the political situation of our day. It has nothing to do with how frustrated or upset I am about it, but I have to control my reactions and learn how to speak the truth in love, the way Jesus told us to. So I don't ever have to agree with you, but I do need to understand you, and loving you is a non-negotiable, no matter how stupid you are. Mm. So, I think when you understand that as a believer, and look, I say this, I'm preaching to myself. The book is full of stories, and every chapter almost is about how I epically failed at this throughout my political career. It is about the things that I did that I wish I could take back that contributed to where we are today. I'm not above this. I still strive to live this out every day. When I speak,
we're breaking up a little bit. So I don't know what's happening.
Or whatever it is. Oh, sorry. You want me to go back to?
Yeah.
What do you want me to go back to?
We're gonna cut. I'm gonna cut this part out. So go ahead. So
Okay, yeah. So, the basic premise is whatever you believe in, whether it's Jesus or God or the universe or Buddhism or whatever it is, there is a fundamental premise, and that is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And in Christianity, Jesus takes it a step further and says, love your enemies. If you notice throughout scripture, Jesus had really strong words for a lot of people, but no one stronger than the people who got it right. They stood on the side of truth, but they lacked love, and that was the Pharisees. He was the harshest on the people who were legalistically right, but had no love for people in their hearts. And my concern is that wherever you sit on the religious spectrum or political spectrum, if we miss out on that love element, which is recognizing and respecting the God in each of us, then we are not able to maintain this beautiful experiment called America.
well said. I am with you. I always say this. I say this a lot on the show. I'm a big accountability person. People need to take responsibility for their own actions. You get to a point, I don't know what the age is, let's just say 25 for argument's sake. You can't blame your parents anymore. You can't blame this.
Right.
You can't blame that. You can't, you can't go in and steal $1,000 worth of merchandise because there's something in history that that your people were not treated well, and the whole deal. It's an excuse. Don't make excuses. All right. Or you got fired and then you go and then you and then you shoot up somebody that works in the company. I mean, there's no excuse for any of that. So I agree with you. I agree with you on all that. And when your book is published, we would like you to come back, and I'll have read it.
I'd be so honored.
And then we can talk about it, which is exciting. But you bring up such a great point, and it's been happening, and it happened before this election, and it's been happening for quite a while with families breaking up. I mean, marriages have broken up. I mean, it's like all kinds of crazy stuff. Long-term friendships have been breaking up. And it's happened, I think, more because politics is now part of pop culture. And also because we have 1,000 channels, and we have podcasts, and we have, all social media to have all this information and everything, so pre like 1995, people argued, but not to this level. Like we are at a completely different level. So, so with that said, what did you do on The Bachelor?
I knew we were coming back to that.
What were you doing on The
Bachelor?
No. Are you married? I'm sorry. Are you married?
I was. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm no longer married. Actually, in retrospect, fortunately, I'm no longer married, but I was married for 3 years. I could have really used a husband that was supportive on the campaign trail. I was not married then. That's probably the time I needed one the most. Mm-hmm. I got married in 2018, and unfortunately just didn't work out. But for good reason, we got divorced. But I respect the institution of marriage so very much. However, when I was on The Bachelor, I was 30. I was probably the oldest contestant they ever had. The reason I went on The Bachelor was because I was so disenchanted with law firm life that I thought, I've got to find an exit. But now I have this really expensive law degree that I paid for in blood, sweat, and tears. So I have to have like a good exit. It can't be like a half-assed exit. It's got to be like, oh, I got on The Bachelor, I won, and now I have my own TV show or something like that. So I went in fully intending to win. I didn't care if the guy was an ogre. I didn't care if he had like 3 fingers and like 2 heads. I wanted to win to have an exit from firm life. And I went in and I just couldn't do it. Like, truthfully, the guy didn't have 2 heads and he didn't have 3 fingers. He was just super normal. And at the end of the day, I've realized that I'm way better talking about things that I believe in than I am talking about myself and trying to sell myself to someone. Also, because I went to Wellesley for a semester, there was this part of me that just felt like I was feeding into this misogynistic culture where a bunch of women are like competing for the affections of men, which is probably a reflection of the real world on both sides, whether it's the Bachelorette or the Bachelor. But it was very degrading to me, frankly. And the thing about the producers, all of whom were fabulous, ABC was great. They treated you really well. And I had a lot of fun. I didn't stay on past the first night, but I did a lot of time in LA with the producers on the way up. I had a lot more at stake than other people who were contestants. The White House press office was watching because President Bush was still in, and they made that known to me. And the chairman of my law firm emailed me and said, "We'll be watching, make us proud." So I had a lot of things to be concerned about. And I ended up being the deaf mute. And I was zero fun on camera. I had zero interest in just talking and gushing about how hot The Bachelor was and how I felt so in love with him after 2 seconds of shaking his hand that I literally couldn't fake it. My mom was an actress in Taiwan, oddly enough, and she is such a good actress. She had her own TV show. When we go to Taiwan, people recognize her. She's like a thing. I must be adopted. Like, I don't even know. Like, I am legit missing that link. Like, whatever that gene is, I'm the opposite of an actress.
But look at everything you've accomplished. I mean, that's just another thing. That's like saying, you're not a pharmacist. I mean, how many careers can one person have? So what season?
That's kind of yo. But if you actually saw me on film, and you can, I'm probably living somewhere on like the internet. It's really mortifying. I'm like literally the deaf mute on the show. And it's just my facial expressions that they capture. And it's just, I'm mortified the entire time because the girls were so trashy. And the things they were saying were disgusting. And I was embarrassed for President Bush that I was on the show, to be honest.
What season was that?
It was season 12. It was called London Calling. The Bachelor with some guy whose teeth they had to fix because, Brits. And like abnormally small hands, not a good sign. And just all kinds of things that were just like, honestly, I couldn't.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. So that's awesome. Okay, a couple things. One, I need to find you somebody, because the fact that you're single and you run around in the wild is a sin. Second, when you come to New York, you have to make sure you get together and absolutely give us all of your social media, website, all that stuff.
Yeah, I will. It's DG Gitsham is my Instagram handle with a H. I know it's weird. And you can find me in Facebook as well, Denise Gitsham. Denise Grace Gitsham, I think technically it is. But
and you have a website?
I do. It's Denise Grace Gitsham, GITSHAM.com. I'm not like really big on self-promotion. Really, I just really believe in ideas. And so if you're interested in like reading some of my thoughts on all sorts of things, from kind of what it's like to go through a divorce and the thought process and the feelings you have going through it, to what it's like to fall in love and think that this is the person you want to be with the rest of life, to just hard lessons I learned being a woman coming up in politics and kind of how to turn that to your advantage. I've got a lot of articles on there that speak to those issues.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'll have to go and check it out. Well, It was a joy, a pleasure. You
Privilege.
Are fabulous. Beyond,
so are you.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Jennifer, for sending me the email.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen.
I love it. All right, please, everybody, check Denise out. She is fabuloso, as you heard. I am Ellen Karis, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Greek Chick Comic. Ellen Karis, Greek Goddess of Comedy, on Facebook, ellenkaris.com, my website. We will have this podcast, all the other podcasts that we did for the last 9 seasons. Did I mention that in the beginning? And thank you. Until